I actually, you were on my radar because I was at the 125 Years of Women at Brown.
Oh, wow.
And your family was there at the time. I mean, it was a whole different time. It was like May 2016, like pre everything, right?
Yes.
And you were there with all these other great women, and so you were on my radar even then. I was like, that's a cool person that would be great for an alumni event one day. So
That's so nice. Yeah, well, we're so glad to always support Brown, and it's nice to think about a time when we could all be together in a in a hall. Yeah, seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I know there's a lot going on for you, especially this weekend, but I just before we kind of started to dive into talking about you and your writing, I know you've posted a little bit about how your father has gone back on the front lines with can you talk a little bit about what he's doing in terms of his medical career coming back? And
yeah, I mean, my dad retired after 30 years as the director of the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital. He retired a few months ago, and he fought to get relicensed to practice telemedicine in the areas that are hardest hit by COVID that don't have ICU doctors. So Louisiana and New Jersey is where he's been sort of beaming into every morning.
Wow. Well, that's really generous of him to go out on the front lines, and I'm sure he's been sharing some experiences with you.
Yeah, it's really brutal. He's definitely very haunted in a way that I haven't seen him. So it's really it really puts things in perspective.
Right. Well, that's why I was kind of harkening back to that 2016 time, hoping that, there might be some kind of full circle aspect to that.
Yes.
Try and think about being at that May 2016 period. But before I basically, with the invitation, I wanted to let everybody who is participating just kind of come and ask you questions that they might have. But it would be incumbent on me to ask you, as far as your connection with Brown, when you were at Brown, were you writing when you were already at Brown? Was this in your mind's eye to write something about your grandmother or with your grandmother even back then?
Oh, this was not what I was writing. I was at Brown a long time ago. But I was a poli-sci concentrator at Brown, and then my sub concentration was literary arts. So if I could do it again, I would have just been lit arts. The writing that I did at Brown is still, I think, the best writing that I've done, and it's where I started taking myself seriously as a writer. I think I didn't have the confidence to say I'm going to concentrate in literary arts because I didn't know if I was a writer or not. I still remember the people in my sections and the TAs that I had and the professors that I had. I actually was emailing with a professor I had at Brown this morning, Ross Chait in public policy, who maybe some of you know and had. Mandy, you're nodding. Do you know Professor Chait?
I love Professor Chait. He was the best. Yes. I was a public policy concentrator.
Did you take good government?
Of course.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. So actually, the book that I read to my baby is one that Professor Chait. We're in my office, but it's also my son's office. And his book is a Chait gift. He was such a great. He and his wife were so supportive, and he's the greatest professor. But even though it wasn't a writing class, I would say that him taking my arguments seriously and taking my papers seriously, in like a non-patronizing, just like a deeply engaged and thoughtful way, made me have confidence as a writer. And so even though he didn't teach writing, he was definitely the professor that I think about when I write. I'm like, oh, would this pass muster? Would he be like, very interesting? But yeah.
Great.
I'm thinking back to my time at Lit Arts at Brown too, and it was really, I'm so lucky. We're all so lucky to have been at a place that nurtures creativity and allows us to sort of push ourselves. It sounds cheesy, but I signed up for a graduate seminar in screenwriting as a sophomore, and I'm so glad I did, because now I have to adapt the book into a screenplay, and I'm literally going back to books that were in the syllabus.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
And your mother was also, she was part of the first female class at Brown.
She was. Yeah, she applied to Pembroke and was accepted to Brown. And she was in the first class of women admitted to Brown, and she was so excited. She was also only 16 when she went. Well, she was 17 when she matriculated, but she was 16 when she applied. If I don't know if has everybody read the book? Oh, great. Okay, I can't see Abigail, but I assume you're there.
I assume she's nodding.
Okay. Yeah. She definitely. She was American Civ, and she was also the first year that American Civ existed. She was part of the post 1969 Ira Magaziner takeover. She was in the sort of let's build the university that we want to build, and so AmCiv came out of that, and she lived in the Waterman Co-op.
That's great.
Which sort of tells you everything you need to know.
That's great. Yeah, actually, I was an AmCiv concentrator too, and there was that whole era basically in the 70s when Tom Wolfe was in AmCiv and got his PhD, and I think it really was a nexus for that type of concentration. But most people just said it was for people who couldn't make a decision.
Yeah.
So, but that's great. It was really a delight to be able to, I didn't realize that your family had kind of this historical connection to Brown, longstanding. So that was great to read as well, on top of everything else. But I just have one more question before I kind of pass it over to people. Just being in San Francisco for so long too, it seems like in your book, your grandmother had a lot of very ardent beliefs about San Francisco, and and that your hair was going to get frizzy and all of these other horrible things were going to happen to you coming to San Francisco. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about coming to San Francisco after Brown, and just it was just kind of a humorous aspect of her being.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in San Francisco for almost a decade. I loved it. I loved the Bay Area. We lived in Oakland and SF. When we first moved to San Francisco, we lived in DuBose Park, DuBose Triangle, and then moved to sort of right on the border of Castro and Noe Valley, and then moved to Rockridge. So we lived everywhere. We were there from 2010 to 20. Then we were there for a long, I think 5 years in San Francisco. I doubled it in my head. But yeah, my grandmother just, California to her, where I still live, I live in LA now. California was just like a fictional concept for unserious people. There was to say I'm going to live in California would be like, I'm going to build a colony under the sea and live there. It's just like, sure, I've heard of it in the movies, but nobody actually does that. And so, yeah, she never visited me in San Francisco. I came to her at all of her various places. I don't think she would have liked our apartment.
It's just funny to count how many times that she slagged San Francisco. It's just kind of funny. It was
the narrative of I think a reason for that in the book, and it's something that I thought about afterwards when I was like, is this harsh? Was that it was her way of saying, don't move 3,000 miles away from me. It would have been the same if it were London, if it were on the other side. Her knocking San Francisco was not knocking the lovely and culturally rich city that I love, and my husband and I fell in love it, and it's where still half of our friends live. We go up to the Bay Area a lot because that was where we first laid down our roots, and I still crave ramen shop in Oakland and and cheese board, and yeah, I miss San Francisco a lot. There was like a little, actually, do any of you live in SF proper in the city? Okay. What neighborhood are you in?
I live in Potrero Hill.
Okay, yeah, so maybe a little, there's a restaurant that was very small in our old, it's called L'Ardoise. If you know if it exists, then it would make me very happy if it's still there. But who knows in this time. Anyway, yeah, I think I would say it was less to be derisive about San Francisco and more to sort of like condemn my personal life choices and to express in her passive aggressive way a reluctance to let go. And it came out, as most things do in Jewish relationships, in a terribly passive aggressive way.
It was just fun to see San Francisco as comic relief so many times in
Sorry.
her dialogue. It was really just kind of fun for that aspect, just living here. But I just want to, I want to pass it on to the book club here, as everyone's put down their lasagnas and everything, to ask you some questions about the book.
Great.
Shy Brunonians. Mandy, I've already had you in a book club, but I know you can ask questions. Get on it, girl.
You're right. Okay. First of all, thanks for doing this, Bess. I enjoyed your book. I mostly, before the book came out, really enjoy your tweets. You have really good tweets.
Oh, thank you.
But I am actually wondering, it's kind of unrelated to the book, but you talk a lot about your relationship between your mom and your grandma. And I'm wondering, how has your relationship been with your mom since you had a child? Like, have you seen kind of a similar kind of relationship? Is she taking the grandmother role like your grandmother took? And how's that been?
Yeah. I feel like this is therapy. You're going to charge me $125 an hour. So in the book, I sort of foretold what kind of happened. There's a passage in the book where I'm trying to envision what my mother would be like as a grandmother. And I mention specific details that have actually manifested themselves in reality. It's eerie it's eerie, I guess, how well I have her number. She is an amazing grandmother, and she completely spoils my child with plastic crap that my husband and I would never buy. We're like, yeah, she, like our car seat is so much worse than their car seat, and we got like a safe car seat, but they got like the top of the line car seat. And that was the detail in the book, and I was like, oh yeah, she got the upper baby.
Is she physically near you guys, or?
So the crazy answer to this is she and my dad moved to LA.
Oh, wow.
They have somebody in their apartment in New York, and we are a 5-minute drive from each other. And that could not be stopped. I was not part of that conversation. I was definitely on the receiving end of that conversation. I was in the room when that conversation happened, but I was not a voice. And yeah, they love our son in a, I would say, psychotic way. It probably requires medical intervention to the extent that before all of this, they would say things like, he just said dog when he was like 6 months old. And I was like, okay, maybe he was saying like a D or an N sound coincidentally in a 10-minute period where there was a dog walking by, but he's fine. To them, he's a genius. So yes, they're to see her transform in the way that I imagine she watched her own mother transform is this sort of striking parallel. And I will also say that when I looked at do you have kids or a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is something that I heard people say before I had a child. And once I did, I was like, oh, the amount of empathy I had for her after I had a kid, realizing in this sort of flood of oxytocin and just whatever it was, that like, oh my God, all of her worry, all of her kvetching, all of her fear, all of her ambition for me, I get it. Like I get it in an instant. And so there was a real immediate sense of forgiveness of my mother and whatever overbearingness might have been part of that. Because I guarantee I will be so much worse to my son. Yeah. So it's been interesting, and it really, the book is the spoiler alert for my life.
That's great.
How does it feel to have this sort of thing, this part of you that was inside you for so long out there? How does that feel?
Crazy. I mean, I'm like talking about my mother with someone I haven't met, although I feel like there's something with Brunonians where we all went to the same college, so we sort of like, I don't know, I feel like there's some selection system that happens when we all sort of are looking for similar things in life if we chose to go to Brown. So even though you're not complete strangers, this is not, but you are. So that's great. I'm working this out because it is something that
No, it's interesting.
No, it's odd that it didn't occur to me that the Microsoft Word document on my computer would then become public when I was writing a book. So it's like, I remember my husband's reaction when I was like, just, this is the first pass, this is the manuscript, just tell me what you think. Oh, I miss your, you've seen me write this for 2 years, just, I'm giving you the whole thing, I'm going to send it, what do you think? And he was like, you wrote a book about me. I was like, no, this is about my grandma, what are you talking about? He's like, no, he's like, what name is it? And like, he's like, you realize that like, you're going to make our life public. And I was like, let me see that. And so, yeah, it does. I sort of lay bare. It's not just having a creative project out there for public consumption. It's a creative project that puts my family and my life and my grief and my psyche at the center of it. So I think that unlike, an Avengers movie, this is not something that's going to be, this is not an incredibly public thing. It will be selected by mostly women who are coming at it from similar experiences or gravitate toward books about grandmas. I feel like it's not going to be a huge audience, but it is public and it's odd, but hopefully there's still like enough mystery about me that I get to have some semblance of privacy.
It definitely was very, really touched me as someone who loved her grandmother very, very much. And also coming from a Jewish background, but Sephardic. So really very, very different kind of experience also. But it really, like at the end, I was definitely quite weepy as just, the love that you feel, and then the whole family dynamics throughout. It really resonated, and it was a lovely thing to read. So I thank you for that. It was really special.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear. Thank you.
It really was. And there's so much that's similar, and then yet it's such an individual case. Yeah. But it really taps into some important themes in one's life.
Yeah.
So,
is your grandmother is she still living?
No, she passed away. So she saw 2 of my kids, but they were tiny. And she was really well until she was sick, and then passed away pretty good. It was 8 months or something. Yeah. But just a remarkable woman who I loved and had a very special relationship with. Not like, she was really intertwined in your sort of day-to-day life, but we're very, very close, and this wonderful person. And I think that's another thing that really, to me, was very lovely, was bringing her to life, especially right now when, you could argue that older people are kind of being like, well, so what? It's like 100,000, 200,000, whatever. Right. Beautiful humans who have had these rich lives and they have touched you so tremendously. So I think it was even more special to read it right at this time.
Oh, well.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I completely agree. I mean, this is the sort of this idea of collateral damage, or in some way a like devaluation of life that's happening about the elderly is just so craven and scary. And I like, one thing that makes me feel good about it being out now is that, like, okay, let's humanize the elderly. Like this, especially in the like field that I work in, old women are looked at as either like punchlines or super enfeebled and you know
invisible,
pathetic, or even like isn't it funny that she would be a sexy like comic relief? Like, is it like, like there's sort of something really patronizing about that, and the way that some shows do that. And I feel like there need to be more stories that are matrilineal honorings of older women. We get so much of that from men. There's so many, like for every Meyerowitz story, or like, the plight of the old man is like, you win the Nobel Prize in Literature for that.
Yeah,
we get it. You used to be able to get any girl you want, and it's very difficult now. But so good. I hope there are more people that are writing books about older women. I think there are good stories to be told. Yeah.
And one like other little thing that just came to mind is, sorry, Mandy, then you can ask questions. She's my friend, so I can also.
Nice.
That's true.
My grandmother used to say, just always remember me. And I just think like, wow, like that was such a thing. And I don't know that I fully appreciated it. And again, I think, look at, you've just honored your grandmother in such a beautiful way. Like that's really, what else could they want? But
I hope so.
Remember me.
I hope so.
And I think
my dear friend Leora, my friend from Brown, all my friends are my friend from Brown. Did you guys meet at Brown?
No, we met later, but we are 5 years apart, so we do have the same reunions.
Great, yeah. Actually, yeah. So my husband and I both went to Brown, as you know, but we only right, yeah. You're like, oh yeah, what's his name?
Charlie.
Yeah, you're like, I know where he went to high school.
his parents seem really nice too.
Yeah, exactly. You guys had a lovely wedding. So we were the same year, but we only started dating, and this was not in the book. We only started dating. We were both 0.5. And we started dating our 0.5 semester.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Cool. So we went through 4 years not knowing each other. And we joke that the only reason we met, we were 0.5, we met that fall, and we decided to get married because we were the only two people our age.
Yeah,
so
I like that in the book when your grandmother is saying something about, well, he's going to take a Jewish girl to Maine, and you make the remark about he's been 4 years at Brown, he's only taken Jewish girls to Maine.
Totally, yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
Like,
although
that's all that happens.
I think it might be the first Jewish girl he dated. I'm just realizing this now because his girlfriends at Brown, I later found out, were definitely not Jewish, like Van something last name.
Wow, okay. Departure.
We did it.
Yay, join the tribe. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be mindful of your time, but I also just want to thank you for the book, especially now, just with the way that I don't know if you actually started your book with a particular scene in mind when you started, but I just want, like, two scenes that really stuck with me were just the scene where as a 10-year-old, she's taking you to lunch as you're trying to navigate this horrible school situation that you're in. Just to imagine that happening, just a kid going to school right now, and see the extra effort that a grandmother would make to just make it all right in that way was just something that is still kind of living with me, that moment. And also just the moment where she is just on the subway meeting her grandfather and pretending not to know, how to do math. Just again, riding the subway, riding the BART, something like that, and having that exchange and having that potential for a whole life to happen just from that exchange, or just two things that really stuck with me. But I just wanted to share that, but also just ask you if was there a specific scene in your head that kind of launched this process for you when you were writing, or just like bits and pieces?
Yeah. Well, thank you for those reflections. Those are two moments. I'm trying to figure out what makes it into the movie right now. So I'm like, okay, we're going to keep we're gonna keep the math thing. Because to make a 240 whatever page book into 90 minutes of content is an exercise in whittling. No, so in terms of like central images and central scenes, the whole book sort of catapulted forward from exactly where it starts. I started imagining my grandma talking to me at her funeral, sort of like roasting the family and kvetching about being dead. And the line, "It's a terrible thing to be dead," is something that I remember just sort of sighing and hearing at her funeral. And actually at her funeral is where I started doing her voicemails. Her eulogy, I was tasked with delivering the eulogy at her funeral, and I was having trouble finding words. I find the way that often grief is talked about in Western civilization, especially in America, is sort of couched. It's sort of something that's supposed to remain unseen, and then you have a set of cliches that you say. You know, she passed away, and she was beloved, and she will be missed dearly, and here's to. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I found it really hard to express how much she meant as a person in this sort of eulogy format, like doing her biography and then trying to make it not about me. And I really struggled with that writing assignment. And so at around 2 a.m. the night before the funeral, I woke Charlie up and was like, what if I just read one of her voicemails? Would that be in poor taste if I just like do my grandma as her? And he was like, yes. What? Like, do your job. Do a nice eulogy. Like, I'll do it. Like, I'll write it. Okay, like you have to do something creative. Like, shut up. And I was like, with all due respect, I'm going to do this. And he's like, I know. And so I did the voicemail that's in the book of her. It's called Two Voicemails in the book. And it's her saying, do you know what happened when your mother went back to work when you were 7 weeks old? I would get on the plane from Palm Beach every Tuesday, and I would fly up and I would sit with you in their horrible apartment by the hospital, and I would talk to you, and we'd watch TV, and I'd eat lunch, and it was fine. And I'd fly back every Thursday, and I wasn't a young woman. And there was, your mother was in her residency program, and there were no other women. There was no precedent. So what was she going to do? She wasn't going to leave you with a stranger. She couldn't afford it, and she was desperate. And so here I was. And then she gets a call waiting, and the voicemail just cuts off because she would always pick up for a friend, like no matter what. She could be in the middle of a fight with my grandpa. Her friends later told me this at her funeral, that there would be times where she would go, thank God you called because I can't get him to listen. And he's like, Bobby, she would always pick up for a friend. So they loved that when it was like call waiting. And so I did that, and my family was laughing and they were crying, and it was her. It was a way to bring her back. And so the two things that made this book make sense to me were that voicemail and her talking about her life at her funeral and what it meant to be dead. And so, I wrote that first chapter all in one sitting, and it included a reference to Georgie and Leo. It included her mother. It included my mother, and getting on a plane, sitting in the jump seat and rescuing her from, a Paris hospital, and demanding she walk again. And I feel like that first chapter is the whole book. And the rest of it sort of reveals the layers beneath what she was saying in that. But if there was one most important passage of it, or I guess if there's to me, the heart of the book is that voicemail called Two Voicemails and the first chapter. Yeah, somebody else joined. Hello, it's Sarah.
Hi. Yes. Sorry I'm late.
Oh no.
May get interrupted trying to keep my son asleep, but
Oh, I hear. How old is he?
he's 4, so
Oh,
doesn't so much love naps, but still kind of needs them.
yeah, I'm dealing with that with an 8-month-old. He's yeah, but it's good to know it'll still be difficult in 3 years.
For forever, probably until
Forever.
you give up, and then you have other
Totally.
challenges.
Totally. Oh my God. Yeah. The yeah, it is difficult. We all know. Do you have a question about the book before I do have to go to him in about 5 minutes, but if you have a question about the book or anything, I'm happy to talk about it.
I don't think I had a
Yeah.
big one. I enjoyed it and
Oh.
wanted, just was, eager to do something a little different and
That's so nice.
Seize the opportunity. Yep.
That's great. No, I don't mean to. Yeah, no, it's so nice that you guys are doing this and that there's a virtual book club. What a cool thing to be doing. And I find that there's like so few ways to connect with people and to feel like part of a group and part of a community. And this is just, it's really nice. I hope. Do you guys do this every week?
Since we've kind of gotten under lockdown, we've tried to brainstorm ways we always wanted to do a book club just kind of in real life. And then once this happened, it was like, oh, this would be a really easy way to connect Brunonians who are already probably looking for something to read at home, and then just to be able to share their thoughts. And I know, most women I know are usually in, if not one, maybe 2 or 3 book clubs, and so even last month when we had a book club with our Pulitzer Prize winner, Andrew Sean Greer, here in San Francisco, we were talking about how when his book came around, like it would be the book that you would read in 2 or 3 different book clubs. And so you already had your spiel down,
Right.
by the time you got to the 3rd one. But and so it's something that we're definitely doing every month. So
that's great.
I appreciate you kind of joining us in Southern Wise. I have to ask, did anyone else think that this was a cinnamon bun when they first saw it from afar? No.
It was that's a good trick the publisher pulled to get people to buy it.
The cinnamon bun. I was like, oh, look at the teal book with the cinnamon bun. That looks really fun to read too. But yeah, that was my first thought. I might have been hungry, but
no, I honestly, whatever pulls people in. Although it's so funny, I've never seen my book at a bookstore because they're getting out during quarantine, and so like the whole light at the end of the tunnel of writing it for me was like, and then I'll go to Skylight Books in Los Angeles where I live in our neighborhood in Echo Park, and well, the bookstore is in Silver Lake, but so yeah, I don't know if anybody has picked it up because of the cover.
Well, I just have to say, because here in my neighborhood, we actually still have a bookstore in our neighborhood. It's about 100 square foot. It's called Christopher's, and she actually was not supposed to be selling books. So she said, if you actually write to me, I will be able to just drop it in front of the store when you need it. And so it was like this whole black market type exchange that was happening with your book, and it came wrapped in brown paper and string like you would tie up focaccia bread in your beach or something. And I was like, oh my God, I've got my little contraband here.
Totally contraband.
So that was great. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing this with us. Anyone else have any other thoughts before we let her go back to her family? And
I'm curious about whether you knew the dynamics between your mom and your grandmother growing up, or is that something that you learned more about as you were writing the book?
Oh yeah, no, that's a good question. And that was a really hard part of not only writing the book, but also like the realization that it would be out in the world. So my mom was my primary source for this book. She was on the phone with me. I'd be like, what happened with, okay, so David was the oldest. What happened with Georgie and Leo? And I know the law school switch story. Like she would get these kinds of calls. I'd be like, so the manifesto against the school, grandma was in Mexico. What was, and so like, she really did fill in all of the salient details about her young life. And like the story Pink Milk that's in the book about basically her being drugged with pentobarbital for 3 years, was a story that my mom told me over dinner, knowing that it would go in the book. I had been writing the book for like a couple months. I was just focusing on my grandmother's childhood, and she knew that there would be these sections and her childhood would be one of them. And she goes, my mom, almost in my grandma's parlance, was like, you know the story about sleepwalking? And I was like, yeah, I know you sleptwalked at camp and woke up outside the dining hall and then a couple times, and I know that they had to find you miles away in a ditch. And she goes, do you know why? And I was like, because you're crazy. So she told it to me, and I was like, at a certain point, halfway through, I was like, stop. Okay, so the doctor, what? Like, and so she really was, like, I think the book is in many ways through her eyes as well as a quiet perspective beneath sort of 2 layers of perspective, my grandmother's and my own. Because she was the source material and she was sort of the subject, her, I guess, editorialization works its way in there as well. And I knew that they didn't have a good relationship, and I knew that a lot of what was happening, I knew from a pretty young age that, oh, this is my grandma's do-over. From a pretty young age, she would even be explicit about it. She would be like, oh, your mother would never let me take her to Bloomingdale's. And I was like, well, you got me, grandma. And so I knew there was like a tension and also like a relief, but the sort of the extent of the cruelties and the sort of attempt at loving, we're all trying our best with our kids. My grandma took her to that doctor because my mom was getting these lightning headaches. My grandma ultimately was the person who got in the jump seat and flew to save her daughter and was ruthlessly ambitious for her daughter. She loved my mom, and this was in many ways the fulfillment of everything she couldn't accomplish as a woman born in 1926. So even though this was a sort of a bad, tough relationship, it was also one of just a woman who was put in a situation that she didn't necessarily feel in control over, doing her best to make sure her daughter didn't repeat that. And she doesn't get to be the snuggly, cuddly mom while doing that. But as a result, she had a daughter who was in the first class of women accepted to Brown and then sailed through medical school at the top of her class. Not to say that those are the hallmarks of success, but it is to say that there was a drive in her to achieve beyond the bounds of what was considered possible at the time. And that's entirely due to my grandmother. So even though it was a complicated relationship, I would say it ultimately is a good one, and one that both my mother and I benefited from equally. Even though I was the pet, my mom was the one who had the full wind in her sails because of Bobby. Yeah, if that answers.
It's wonderful.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I only have about 40 minutes, but
thank you.
This is what juggling a baby is.
Well, hopefully you had fun crashing. Authors don't oftentimes get to crash their own book clubs about their own books.
I feel like
hopefully that was interesting for you.
It was. Now say what you really think about it.
No, it was a joy. So thanks again for your time. I hope you have a great year, and we're looking forward to seeing how the movie progresses with this. It'll be really interesting. Catherine Zeta-Jones, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. You know the drill. Thank you. And thank you. I hope you all stay safe and well and keep doing cool things like this. And Sarah, I hope your son stays asleep for his nap. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.